The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. Having classes on the Surangama Sutra and any other sutras and classes, I think it is quite important for you to pay attention. Throughout the teachings, if you were to doze off or keep wiggling around, or if your mind is very distracted, though your body is sitting in the Sangha, but your mind has already flew out of the windows, that is not the appropriate way of receiving teachings. On top of that, it is important for you to keep quiet while coming to the class and while going back to your home after class. It is important for you to be able to guard your speech. Do not keep talking at all times. Another aspect I would like to remind you of is you need to be prompt. You need to have a sense of time. You need to be on time. It's crucial. When you have a sense of time, if it is carved in your value, it will be really meaningful. For example, if you know that you will take that much amount of time every night to attend class, which is 2 hours, either before class chanting, that is about half an hour, and then the post-class chanting is about 10 minutes. Would you take that much time to engage in your daily chants every day if we don't have class? I really hope that you need to think about it. Some of you probably would only chant the aspiration, or some of you would only chant for 20 minutes or half an hour, but you have other practices as well. So we need to take that much time every day. We need to put that time aside so that you will be able to finish your daily chants and your daily practices. Another really important sign of practicing together is the use of prayer wheels. When I practice at home, I do use prayer wheels, but not as much as when I practice all together in a large Sangha. When I am practicing over here together with all of you to engage in the pre-class and post-class chantings, I naturally use the prayer wheels, and I will use it for 40 minutes. Would you be able to use for 40 minutes of prayer wheels every day at home by yourself? You need to really ask yourself that question. Through that, we would be able to see that the power of practicing together, such kind of a collective force is quite great, and the collective merit is also quite great. Therefore, we need to pay great attention, and we need to appreciate and treasure such opportunity to practice together. Another note on listening attentively is that if you don't pay attention when you're listening to classes, your state of mind would be reflected on your state of body poses, your postures, and that could influence the others sitting around you. So, my suggestion to those of you who can't train your mind and your body to be still and to be attentive during class is that it would be the best for you not to go to the shrine hall and listen to classes in the classroom. But nowadays, I think we can tame those wild animals, the wild horses and animals. We as human beings can tame them. We as human beings can tame them. Then why can't we tame ourselves and eradicate all of our terrible habitual tendencies from the past? At least if you can't eradicate it, can you suppress it at least during the class? Anyhow, that was just some of the things I would like to state before the class. Now let us look at the Surangama Sutra. We probably already understood that the Surangama Sutra is very different than the other sutras. It's more difficult and very different than, for example, the Diamond Sutra, Heart Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra, and Lotus Sutra. Those sutras are easier to understand as long as you understand Dharma and you are average in eloquence, then it should be able, you should be able to expound that. But when it comes to the Surangama Sutra, if you have no foundation, then it will be very difficult for you to give the teachings on it. And it's hard for you to convince the others to understand it. Of course, there were a great numbers of masters in China mainland who had expounded on the Surangama Sutra, such as Master Mengcan, Master Xuanhua, Master Nanhuaijing, and Master Tanshu. They all expounded on the Surangama Sutra. But in the recent decades, and even a few hundreds of years, not many people had given the teachings on the Surangama Sutra. So now this particular responsibility has landed to each of you, whomsoever you are. Even if you're just even if you are a young monastic or a lay practitioner, you should be prepared to give the Dharma teaching on the Surangama Sutra. Whomsoever you are, whatever age you are, you should have such a kind of plan to propagate the Surangama Sutra in the world. Make the aspiration that if no one in the world would give teachings on Surangama Sutra, I will be giving teachings on the Surangama Sutra. The wisdom that's given in Surangama Sutra can be accepted by the worldly beings nowadays. If we were to give teachings to the worldly beings on the emptiness and give the teachings on the 400 verses, I think people would generate doubts and they would feel kind of opposed to it. But if you were to give teachings through the ways that is stated in the Surangama Sutra, the way that the Buddha had expounded with layers and layers of analyzing, I think it would be very helpful, especially to the Westerners. It seems that the Westerners really enjoy the logical analysis. Therefore, if you were to have the opportunity to expound and to propagate the Surangama Sutra to the West, I think it is crucial. It would be really important. If you can study it and teach it in different languages, that would be really important and helpful as well. I understand that the Surangama Sutra is not available in many different foreign languages, so you can make the aspiration of translate it and to propagate it and teach it in different languages. That is necessary, and that is your responsibility. That is something that you really need to do. There are all kinds of frivolous things that's on our mind. Sometimes we think about, what am I going to eat tomorrow? What's my meal plan? And am I going to have hot pot or pizza or cake? Those are not important. As the sentient beings of the desire realm, if you were to be bind by your tongue faculty, by all of those, which comes to the conclusion of being empty, why would you grasp onto it? Isn't that quite foolish? So we need to focus our mind onto something much more meaningful. Anyhow, I'm not going to expound too much. Previously, we've already covered on the eye, ear, and nose. Today, we will cover on the tongue, body, and mind. We will cover all three of these today: the tongue consciousness, the body consciousness, and the mind consciousness. I noticed that some of our fellow Sangha members have rather very sharp understanding and are quite eloquent. Later on, you will have the opportunity to expound and give teachings on the Surangama Sutra. You won't have any problems when it is your time to give the teachings on Surangama Sutra. But of course, firstly, you have to study the Surangama Sutra really well. Otherwise, you won't be able to teach to the others. Now let's look at the tongue consciousness. In the sutra it says, "Moreover, Ananda, as you understand it, the tongue and the flavors create the condition that produce the tongue consciousness." In this part, it's rather similar to the previous ones, where the Buddha talks to Ananda and said that, well, you should understand that the tongue and the taste, in fact, or the flavor, in fact, creates the conditions to each other, which then produce the tongue consciousness. This tongue consciousness, is it produced because of the tongue, such that the tongue is its realm, or is it produced because of the flavors, which that the flavors are its realms? In the 12 ayatanas and 18 dhatus, the previous, this is similar to the previous observations, but in the later part, it gets a bit different. I feel that the Buddha would use rather a slight different angle of analysis and slight different logic to further give teachings. He didn't use one particular logic to analyze all of the consciousness. Rather, he talks about each of them from a slight different angle. Even from the way that the Buddha gives teachings on it through different angles, we understand that the Buddha is extremely wise and he has such great wisdom. He would be able to give teachings of emptiness from any different angles. And it's very easy for him as well. So in this way, we naturally would come to the understanding that all consciousness are empty. With this impeccable logic, it's very easy for us to understand, and it is so accurate that it would not be refuted. So it's quite important and very meaningful for us to understand it. Now let's look at the tongue consciousness. Previously, we talked about the nose consciousness, where it talks about the fragrance, the scents that we can smell. Today, we're going to talk about the flavors that our tongue can taste. The consciousness that can perceive flavors in the morning, during your breakfast, or your lunch or your dinner, and sometimes people really like snacking around. You definitely are very familiar with this flavor. There are people who really like to eat sunflower seeds, the ones that's shelled, so eat those as a snack. In Tibet, we call it the food that eradicates virtuous roots. Because whenever you eat those sunflower seeds, that stops you from chanting mantras, so we call it the food that eradicates virtuous roots. I think the monastics over here don't really like to eat them, but I know that in the past some Tibetan Jumos really enjoy it. But I think in general, we know that we spend so much effort and energy to fulfill our tongue, which is rather quite small compared to the whole proportion of our body. There was a TV show, it's called China on the Tip of the Tongue, which is a documentary that talks about the different food that's cooked in various areas in China. Also, the different kinds of vegetables and food that can be harvested in different areas of China. On one hand, we would be able to see how the food are harvested through all the great effort of the farmers, such as the lotus root. It's very difficult to harvest them, so we would cherish them more. But on the other, we see how much human beings kill the other beings to fulfill the selfish longing for a particular type of taste. Human beings are indeed quite pitiful, because in the future, all of the negative deeds that they've committed just to satisfy their tongue consciousness, just to fulfill the flavor, they would have to repay such kind of negative deeds. There will be karmic retributions. Now, let's look at Surangama Sutra and talking about the emptiness of the tongue consciousness. In the sutra over here, it says that, suppose Ananda, that consciousness were produced because of the tongue. Then all the sugarcane, black plums, huanglin, which is a coptis that tastes really bitter, and salt, wild ginger, and cassia in the wood would be entirely without flavor. Also, when you taste your own tongue, is it sweet or bitter? Now, all of the different flavors, such as the sweet cane and the sour black plum, or the very bitter huanglin, it's a type of plant that has a very bitter flavor in it. Also, the salty salt and the spicy ginger, and cassia, which is also spicy, I think. All of these flavor, if you were to say that it were produced because of the tongue, then these flavors shouldn't have any flavors anymore, shouldn't have the variety of flavors anymore. Why is that? It is because if it were because of the tongue, then when you taste your own tongue, is it sweet or is it bitter? Suppose the nature of the tongue were bitter, then what would it be that it tasted the tongue? Since the tongue cannot taste itself, who would have the sense of taste? Whenever you taste your own tongue, since the tongue faculty should be able to taste, and you're saying that the flavor, you're saying the consciousness is a producer from the tongue, then you should be able to taste all kinds of flavors from the tongue. If you're tasting with your tongue, then is your tongue spicy? Is it bitter? Is it sweet? Is it sour? You understand it, right? Out of the 6 flavors, if you were to say that this is bitter, then you're saying the nature of your tongue is bitter. Then who is tasting your tongue? If there is no tasting, how would you know the nature of your tongue is bitter? Since the tongue cannot taste itself, who would have the sense of taste? Previously, we also talked about how the eye cannot see the eye itself. The tongue cannot taste the tongue itself either. Then who is it that knows there is the bitterness or sweetness that is produced from the tongue? Who knows that bitterness or sweetness is the nature of the tongue? Nobody would know that anymore. Therefore, it is not correct to say that consciousness is produced from the tongue faculty. If the nature of the tongue were not bitter, previously the Buddha asked, well, are you saying that the tongue has the bitter taste? Now over here, since the Buddha already refuted that, then the Buddha continued to say, if the nature of the tongue were not bitter, there would be no flavor engendered by it. If you're to say that the nature of tongue is not bitter, not sweet, not spicy, not sour, then you're just simply making an empty statement, because the flavor is not produced from the tongue. And there would be no flavor engendered by it. Thus, how could a realm be established? Simply put, are you tasting food with your tongue faculty? Many people would say that, oh, it's not completely relying on the tongue faculty, but the majority of you feel that, well, it definitely has a lot to do with the tongue faculty, isn't it? Without the tongue faculty, how would you be able to taste it? Many of you probably have that thinking. But after this logical analysis, you would be able to understand that the flavors cannot be produced from the tongue. Is it that after this particular analysis, everyone would be able to understand that there is no flavor can be tasted by the tongue, and then people won't be able to taste it? But maybe tomorrow morning after you wake up, you will forget about this altogether. Now, in the sutra, it says that if it were produced because of a flavor, the consciousness itself would be a flavor. If it were produced because of a flavor, because of an object, then the consciousness itself would be a flavor. The case would be the same as with the tongue organ being unable to taste itself. How could the consciousness know whether it had flavor or not? Now, when it comes to the tongue consciousness, if such consciousness were to come from the object that is a flavor, then consciousness itself has transformed it into flavor. Otherwise, how could you produce a consciousness? But if they were the same, then there is no way for anything that could be produced from itself. So the tongue itself has become flavor. And the flavor, the tongue consciousness has transformed into flavor. And the tongue organ, since it is unable to taste itself, how could the consciousness know whether it has flavor or not? If you can't taste flavor, how would you be able to know that this tongue consciousness can know whether there is flavor or not? How would your tongue be able to know this is sugar, this is candy, this is chocolate? How would you know that this is spicy or hot? You won't be able to taste any flavor at all. Just as when we eat tsampa, if we don't put any flavors in it, it doesn't really have any of those strong flavors such as sour, sweet, bitter, or spicy at all. It is similar to that. You will no longer be able to taste anything because the consciousness would not be able to know whether it has flavor or not. Then who's there to taste all the flavors? Moreover, there are more faults associated to that statement. So it says that, moreover, flavors do not all come from one thing. Since flavors are produced from many things, the consciousness would have many substance. The flavors, as we know, it is not produced from this one particular thing. It is rather produced from many different things, therefore many different flavors, such as there is the sweetness to the sugar and the other taste, the other, for example, bitterness to the bitter melon and so on. There are different flavors and different things attached to different things. Now, if you were to say that this flavor is truly existent, then the consciousness that grasps onto the flavors, the tongue consciousness, should also become many things, become many substance. Suppose that the consciousness were of a single substance, and that the substance was definitely produced from flavor. Then salt, bland, sweet, pungent were combined. Their various differences would change into a single flavor, and there would be no distinctions among them. Just to argue it from a different perspective, if you were to say that the consciousness is one, is of one substance, then you are basically saying that the flavors that is our object is of one. All of the spicy and salty and bland and sweet, they are simply produced from compoundedness. And their own characteristics of that particular flavor, such as sweetness to the sugar cane, there are some kind of changes attached to the flavors. To say that the sweetness is combined together with sour and bitter to the spicy. So it changes since it is of one substance. Then over here it says that it changes from one to another. In this way, you're saying that your consciousness is one, but the tongue consciousness is produced from the flavor, all the particles of the object that is flavor. In this way, all of the flavors, since they are of one flavor, they are of different flavors combined into one substance, and then become the different flavors through changes. Sentient beings like us, through our habitual tendencies, we grasp onto different flavors. Some really prefer spicy and some prefer sweetness. So we have lots of grasping to such a small tongue that we have. If you really feel that the consciousness were to be produced from the object, that is the flavor, then when you look back and look at the object itself, the various different flavors would change into one single flavor, and there would be no distinctions among them. In such a way, if there were no distinctions, they would not be called consciousness. Since you will no longer be able to make distinctions of the different flavors, how would it be called consciousness anymore? If you can't even distinguish the different flavors such as sour, sweet, and bitter, and so on, why would you call it consciousness, since it doesn't have the capacity to discern anymore? So how could it further be called the realm of tongue, flavor, and consciousness? If such consciousness cannot be distinguished, then how could it further be called the realm of tongue and flavor and consciousness? This is the second aspect. This is through the analysis on discerning whether the tongue consciousness were to be produced through object or the tongue faculty. Now, after this one's been refuted, let's look at the next one. After these two are refuted, let's look at the next one. Nor can it be that empty space produce your consciousness awareness. So other than those two possibilities that could produce the consciousness of the tongue, the next one is to be produced through emptiness. But how could that be? How could empty space produce consciousness then? According to Master Yuan Ying, he said that since space is unconditioned, how could the unconditioned Dharma to produce consciousness? This is the third aspect. And then the fourth aspect that is to be refuted is to refute the combination. The tongue and flavor could not combine without each losing its basic nature. How could a realm be produced? Similar to the previous refutation, since the object that is the flavor and the tongue faculty, if you were to combine them together, it is not to produce consciousness either. It is because when you were to say that the consciousness is produced through the part that is closer to the flavor or closer to the tongue, either way doesn't work, because one is part of the body, the other one is not part of the body. In this way, you're saying the consciousness has split into two, which is impossible. And there is no entity to it in the middle either. So it doesn't have a self-existing entity anymore. That is why it is said that how could a realm be produced? Master Hanshan states that the refutation on the production based from flavor is to refute on the birth through the other, or production through the other, and refutation on the faculty is the refutation on production from self, and refutation from being generated or being produced from space is the refutation on production without reason. Those are the four different productions that's refuted in the Mula Madhyamika Karika. In it, where it says not from self, not from other, not from both, and not from either, not from any entity at all, anywhere, is there ever any production? So those are the four types of productions that's refuted. The four refutation of production from four extremes, which then comes to the conclusion that everything is without a self-entity. Therefore, you should know that in the sutra it says that as to the tongue and flavor being the conditions that produce the realm of tongue consciousness, none of the three places exists. Thus, the tongue, flavor, and the realm of the tongue, these three do not have their origin in causes and conditions, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. Over here, there are different uses of translation. There's the tongue, the flavor, and then the realm of the tongue, which is more described from the object's point of view. When we were talking about why the consciousness are named after the faculties, for example, we talk about the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, and nose consciousness, but we do not say the form consciousness, the hearing consciousness, and thinking consciousness, and so on. It is because, according to the Treasury of Valid Cognition, it states that there are the very unique causes and conditions that contribute to the consciousness. Therefore, it is named in such a way. For example, whenever we make the sound, we could make sound out of many different types of instruments, such as a drumstick and a hand, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we name it after the faculty rather than the other causes and conditions. Now we've already covered the first 12 dhatus out of 18. Let's look at the next one. The next one is on the consciousness of body, which then includes the three dhatus, the dhatu of the body consciousness, dhatu of the body as a faculty, and then dhatu of touch, dhatu of the particles of touch. In the sutra, the Buddha says, "Moreover, Ananda, as you understand it, the body and objects of touch creates the condition that produces the body consciousness. Is this consciousness produced because of the body, such that the body is its realm? Or is it produced because of the objects of touch, such that objects of touch are its realm?" The Buddha simply asks, well, is it that your body consciousness is produced because of the body, the faculty, such that the body is its realm? Or is it that the consciousness is produced because of objects of touch, such that the object of touch are its realm? And then he continued to say that, suppose, Ananda, that it were produced because of the body, when there was no awareness of the two conditions of contact with and separation from the object of touch, what would the body be conscious of? If you were to say the consciousness derived from the body faculty, then the faults that could be associated with it is as such. When we talk about the body's touch, there are two possibilities, that is separation or contact. If you were to say that the sensation, that consciousness just simply derived from the body itself, then we do not need any of that sensation of separation or touch from the objects anymore. From this way, how could the body, or what could the body be conscious of? If you were to say that the body has a consciousness, the body faculty produces consciousness just by the body faculty itself, how could there be any of the sensation? How could there be any of those consciousness to be aware of those sensations at all? Because it is just by the body itself. There is no way for contact of or separation at all. This is the first one. It's rather very simple. The second one is, suppose it were produced because of object of touch. Then you would not need your body. Without a body, what could perceive contact with and separation from object of touch then? Now, the second one is to say that, it is the consciousness is not produced because of my body faculty, rather it is because of the objects of touch. The object of touch, which then includes the coldness, heat, contact, and separation. But if you were to say that, then what's the need of your body then? All the coldness and heat and contact and separation, if those produce your body consciousness, then what do you need your body for? If you completely throw away the whole body faculty to say that the consciousness is produced because of the external objects, that is not reasonable either. So the first two refuted the production from body and production from object. The next one is the refutation on the combination of both. Our last class, I wasn't quite satisfied with the way I explained it, but after the class, I listened in to some of your post-class discussions, and I think some of you understood it already. The Surangama Sutra is quite interesting. When I was reading it and preparing for it, I felt that I understood it already, but sometimes throughout the class, I felt that I've forgotten about it, or some of it. I also hope that you can read into the commentary by yourself before class. In this way, you will be able to gain a better understanding. I myself, my traditional Chinese, my ancient Chinese understanding is not that great. My Chinese understanding level is rather not that great altogether, so it takes me some extra effort. Should we take a short break? Usually, when we climb a mountain, we shouldn't take too long of a break. The older generation usually tells us to take a short break, just a very brief break would be good. If you take too long of a break, it would stop your momentum. So let's continue to look at the next part. In the sutra, it says that Ananda, things do not perceive objects of touch. It is the body that perceives objects of touch. Whatever objects, if you do not touch them, if there's no contact, the things themselves, let the things to be cold or hot or contact or in contact or in separation, the objects themselves do not perceive touch. It is the body that perceives object of touch. We understand that, right? So whenever your body touches anything, your desk, your chair, in fact, the desk and chairs don't have any sensation of touch, but your body has that. And then in the sutra it says that what the body knows is object of touch, and what is aware of object of touch is the body. There are a few ways of explaining it. Let's look at it. If we were to say that the body's consciousness is produced by relying on the object of touch. In this way, you're saying that consciousness of body is what the body knows is object of touch. So the body that knows the object of touch is the consciousness. And that is completely based on the object of touch. But object of touch is inanimate. According to Master Zixuan, he explained it in this way. If the body consciousness were to be produced by relying on the object of touch, then your consciousness, the body consciousness, should be touch. And the sensation of knowing touch should become the body. That is why it says that what is aware of objects of touch is the body. In this way, it will be quite chaotic. It will be very much mixed together. One will no longer be able to differentiate the subject and object anymore. You're saying that the body consciousness is... So that fault is found in saying that the body consciousness is derived from the object, that is the touch. And then the next one says that what is the object of touch is not the body, and what is the body is not the object of touch. The body, being the form, being the faculty, but touch is not body, body is not touch. Since body is the body faculty, and touch is the touch of objects, is not the body faculty.
这两者呢，就是不可能有这个共同的这个或者是赫赫的，就是这样的一种这个处所啊，就是不可能。
So in that way, the two characteristics of body and objects of touch are basically without a location.
如果它没有处所的话呢，身体和
The body and
两个
touch
产生的这个事
cannot
呢
be
就是更不可能
combined
有
together.
啊，就不可能有的。
Therefore,
所以呢，
there is no
就是
location
说
for
和
it.
身即生，自性啊，就是
If
离身
it
即是这个
if
虚
it
空当。
united with the body, it would be the body's own
和
substance
身
and nature.
和身即身体自性，离身即虚空的性。这个怎么讲的呢？
If it were apart from the body, it
如果
would
这样的话呢，
have
就
the
是肯定
same
不
appearance
不可以的
as
嘛，因为
empty
那个
space.
触和这个身体呢，就
This
成为
is
什么呢？
obviously
就是
not
如果这样的话
reasonable
呢，
because
那
you're
触和这
saying
个
that the
身体的
touch
话呢，
and
就已
the
经变成
body
了这个
has
身体
become
的
the
自性了。就是如
characteristic
果你
of
这样
the 成
成
body.
立的话，那就是如果这个刚才前
If you
面
were
就
to
是说是
say
依
that
靠
by
这个
relying on the,
有些
it
人
is
说是这个
produced
是
by relying on the
刚
object
才
of
是依
touch.
靠什么外境而产生的。
According to
但
some
有些
commentary,
注释里面说的这个是合合而破的，但这
this
里看的话
particular
好像
part
不
is
一
the
定是合合
refutation
而破
on
吧，
the
就这里还在讲这个
combination
外境可能
of
是不好的。
body and
那不管怎么样呢，就
object,
是
but I
这个
don't
触呢，就是和
particularly
这
think
个
so
身
because
体啊，就
it
有些
is
注意都
also
是没有
mainly
的，它就你自
talking
己要去
about
理解。
the
那么这样的
object.
话呢，就是如果
Anyhow,
是
this
这个
touch
依靠
and the
触而
body
外境而产生
is a
的话
little
呢，
bit
那
difficult
么
to
就是这
understand
个
since
触的
it
这个
is
跟身体呢
lacking
就是合
in
合
the
一起，
subject
这样的
in
话
the
就
Chinese
变
language,
成
so
了这
it's
个
a
身
bit
体的
difficult
这
to
个自性。
understand.
然而
But
离
what
开
it
了如果
means
身体
is
的话
that
呢，
by
就是那
relying
就
on the
就这个触
object,
呢，就
if
是
you were
变
to
成
say
了这
that
个
it
虚
is
空的
produced
自
by
性，因为
relying on the
刚才说
object,
是这个
then
虚
the
空
touch
是什
and
么
the body
这个外境当中
to be
产生的。
mixed
但它
together
跟你
becomes the
身体
nature
是
of
有
the
一致
body.
如
After
果离开
parting
身体
from
的
the
话，
body, then
那
this
就
touch
它就变
becomes
成
the
了虚
nature
空
of the
相。
space.
这样一来的话呢，就是内外不成，中允合
In
理。内
this
和外呢
way,，
就是现在这个内的这个深层和外
the
的这个出层呢，就是
inside
不
and
完成。
outside
这样的
don't
话，
stand
怎么
up.
会是有
It
中间有一
it
个
would
这个
no
所谓
longer
的
be
盛世
valid.
呢？
How
不可
can
能
one
按
set
理
up a
的。
middle?
如果中
The
不
middle
互利，如
cannot
果
be
中
set up
中的这
either.
个生死
The
不能互利
inside
的话
and
呢，那
outside
内和
are by
外呢，
nature
就是也
empty.
是变成这个
From
空性
what
了。
realm
则如
then
是
is
甚
your consciousness
从
born?
岁月历劫，就是那这样的话呢，就是你的这个你的这个身世，
Ananda,
你的这
your
个身体的世
consciousness
界呢，
of
就是
the
从
body,
什么地方建立啊？就是这个
where is
世
it? Where can you
就是
set
世
it up?
界，就
Where
圣
can you
世界的话呢，
establish
就
it?
是怎么回事建立的？就是没办法建立的。
There's
就
no
是
way
这个破共
There's
生的。
no way and
时故
nowhere
当
to
者，身处
establish
为
it.
缘，
This
胜
is
似
the
世
refutation
界
of
三处不
combination,
也是跟前面一样
a
的。所以呢，
refutation on
身和
the
处为缘的这
production
个
from
身体产
combination.
生，身体
And
和
the next
世所产
one
生的这个
over
世界
here,
呢，
the
三处
Buddha
不是
says
什
that
么
therefore
有
you should
的，
know that
则
as
身
to the
与
body
处
and
身
objects of
体
touch being
三
the
就是
condition that
那么
produce
这样一来
the
的话呢，
realm
就
of
是
body
身体和
consciousness,
还
none
有
of
这
the
个
three
处，
places
还有呢
exists.
就是盛
Thus,
世
the
界
body,
盛世，
objects
这
of
三者
touch,
呢，就
and
是
the
本
realm of
非
the
一
body,
言，
the three
非
do
自
not
然。
have their origin in
那
causes
我们在
and
下一
conditions,
次就已经
nor do
上
their
这个经文
natures
了。
arise spontaneously.
你看身体的知觉也没有了，色
There
土的
is
知觉也
no
没有了，
consciousness of
全
body,
是
no
是这个
consciousness
如
of
来藏的这种光
the
明妙用显现。
tongue. There's
除此之外
just
没有
the
什么了，知道
manifestation
中
of
文
the
妙，这个
miraculous
是这样的。
manifestation of the Buddha
下面
nature.
就是开始
I'm not
讲
sure
那
if
个
you
一
got
根
it,
产
if you
生
have
的
that
意识啊，
insight,
就是一
but
根
maybe
产生的意
you
识。
can understand it from the
那么这个
theoretical
意
point
识
of view.
就是生根
So
生根
now
产
we've
生的
covered
这个
the
什么这个
body
生识，或者是
consciousness
出产生的生识，这两者这三者呢也不存在了嘛，
and
也是一
the
种这个
body as well
妙用
as the
而已。
touch.
那
Those
这样的话呢，我们
dhatus
现
do
在
not
就看
exist
这个
either.
十
They're
八界当中
simply
最
just
后
the
的三界。
wondrous
最后的
manifestation
三界
of
呢，
Buddha
就是由
nature.
佛告诉
Now
阿
let's
难，
look at
就
the
又
last
如所
one,
名
last
依法
three
为缘，
dhatus out of the
身
18
语
dhatus,
意
which
识，
is the
此是
mind
为佛
consciousness and
因
the
意所生，
the
意为
realms of
意为
mind
解，因
and
法作生，
the
以
dharmas.
法为解。
Moreover, it says in the Sutra Ananda, as you understand it, the mind and dharmas create the conditions that produce the mind consciousness.
就作为这
So as Ananda, you understand the mind and dharmas create the condition that produce the mind consciousness. Is this consciousness produced because of the mind such that the mind in its realm, or is it produced because of the dharma such that the dharmas are its realm? Suppose, Ananda, that it were produced because of the mind. In your mind, there certainly must be thoughts. These gives expression to your mind. Now the Buddha used first of all the faculty and then the dharma's production and existence to make the refutation. Now whenever we study the Buddhist logic and the Abhidharma, it's very easy to understand the five faculty consciousness because they have a physical reliance on the body. But when it comes to the mind consciousness, since there is no form faculty for the mind consciousness to be produced, therefore it is more difficult to analyze. According to Abhidharma, it says that since mind consciousness, since the mind faculty doesn't have any shape and color, it is similar to mind. It is a mind consciousness. It is rather very subtle. So considering the different existence of the mind to the five root consciousness, then the mind consciousness is a bit harder to understand. But of course, if we were to delve into the mind consciousness further, it becomes the alaya, becomes dharmadhatu, so it's a bit difficult to understand. But I think this particular explanation is not as difficult. Over here, the Buddha says that out of your consciousness, your mind consciousness, if it were to be produced by relying on the mind faculty, then all the thoughts that's produced can prove there's an existence of the mind faculty. That's from the aspect of faculty. If there are no dharmas before you, the mind does not give rise to anything. Apart from conditions, it has no shape. Thus, what use would the consciousness be? Over here, it says that over here the angle is more from the object point of view. If there are no dharmas before you, then the mind that gives rise, then the mind does not give rise to anything. If there is no dharma that you can grasp onto, then the mind consciousness cannot, then the mind faculty cannot grasp onto anything. So if there's no object, then how could your subject, that is the mind, to produce any shapes? To produce any thoughts, since your mind faculty doesn't have any shape or any colors. Therefore, if there is a lack of object, then what's the function of your consciousness? In the sutra, it says, moreover, is your consciousness awareness the same as your mind organ with its capacity to understand and make distinctions, or is it different? The Buddha said that is your consciousness, and over here the consciousness, according to some commentary, is explained as the eighth consciousness. When it comes to the understanding, that is the seventh, and the making distinctions, that's the sixth consciousness. And the Buddha asked, are these the same or are these different? According to a commentary, it says that the thinking and the distinction is part of the faculty of the mind. However, this particular explanation is different than Abhidharma, because according to Abhidharma, it says that the sixth consciousness is after the mind consciousness is after the previous six extinct. That is the state after this previous six consciousness extinct. Then that's what we call as as the mind consciousness. According to the Chinese tradition, it is stated as that is the shadow of the extinction of the five dusts, the five objects. But over here, this mind faculty is not necessarily the extinction, the distinctions that is referred to. So over here it says that your consciousness and your mind faculty, is it of one entity or of different entities? If it were the same as the mind, it should be mind. How could it be something else that arises? Because you cannot say that it is derived from one entity. One self cannot produce another self. So this is not correct. And then if it were different from the mind, it should thereby be devoid of consciousness. You're saying that it is one of them is the nature of consciousness and the other one is not. Then your consciousness doesn't have consciousness anymore, or your mind faculty doesn't have consciousness anymore. That is not correct either. If there were no consciousness, how would it arise from the mind? If you were to say that they are of the different entities, how would it arise from the mind? If there were consciousness, how would it differ from the mind? Since it is by nature neither the same nor different, how can a realm be established? Let it be the same or different, the mind consciousness cannot be established, the realms cannot be established. Because to derive from the same entity cannot be established, and derived from different entities cannot be established either. If you were to say the mind faculty and the mind consciousness are of different entities, then one of them is not consciousness. In this way, you're saying that the two of them are of different, completely different properties, then there is no way to establish its realm at all. Now the next one is to refute the production from the Dharma, the object of Dharma. But this particular refutation is a bit different than that of the Abhidharma. From what I remember that is taught in the Gateway to Knowledge is that the object of mind faculty includes the sensation, perception, and mental activity out of the five aggregates, as well as the unconditioned and the elements not concomitant with mind or matter. The production and the cessation, which is part of the elements that's not concomitant with the mind, or the object and the Dharma, those are the objects of mind faculty. The unconditioned and the subtle form are also the objects of the mind faculty. So over here, this Dharma, the particles of Dharma or the objects of Dharma that's stated over here is a bit different than the explanation given in the Abhidharma as well as the Gateway to Knowledge. I think sometimes sometimes the different ways of explanation has something to do with the times of translation as well. For example, the Buddhist logic translated in prior to the Diganada and Master Chandrakirti are a bit more difficult to understand, but the Diganada and Chandrakirti's teachings are more easier to understand. Let's look at the sutra. Suppose it were produced because of the dharmas. None of the dharmas of the world exists apart from the 5 defiling objects. Consider the dharmas of form, the dharmas of sound, the dharmas of smell, the dharmas of taste, and the dharmas of touch. Each has a clear, distinguishable appearance and is matched with one of the 5 organs. So the eyes, the form, sound, smell, taste, and touch, and that's the objects, the 5 defiling objects that could be perceived through eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. And those are distinguishable. You can discern them very clearly. The sound is definitely not hearing, and the smell is definitely not touch. So each of the 5 defiling objects has a clear, distinguishable appearance and is matched with one of the 5 organs. They're not what the mind takes in. They're not the object of the mind. So what is the object of the mind? Suppose your consciousness were indeed produced through a reliance on dharmas. If you really have to say that your consciousness is a production from the dharma, then take a closer look at them now. What does each and every dharma look like? What's the shape? What is the defiling object of dharma look like? What is the shape of it? According to the Tibetan translation, it says instead of the defiling objects of dharma, it is explained as the various kinds of dharma. Where it means that all of those said above are not the object of mind consciousness, are not the object of mind. What is dharma then? Underlying the characteristic of form and emptiness, movement, stillness, penetration and obstruction, unity and separation and production and extinction, there is nothing at all. Other than the characteristics of form and emptiness, which is the object of the eye, and the movement and stillness, that is the sound, and the penetration and obstruction, which is to the nose, unity and the separation. That is body or touch, and then production and extinction. Production and extinction is part of the 24 elements not concomitant with the mind, right? So other than those stated above, there is no defiling objects of dharma that can be obtained. And then the next part, it specifically talks about the production and the extinction. When there is production, then form, emptiness, and all dharmas are produced. Let it be form and emptiness, all of those that appears, those are considered as a production. When there is the extinction, then form, emptiness, and all dharmas are extinguished. That is the process of change. And such kind of process is called the production and extinction. There is no character attached to it. There is no particular entity that you can say that it has a self-existent character. That is called extinction or production. You can only call that form and emptiness as production, and when there is the form and emptiness that is extinct, that is called extinguished. The extinguish and production are the object of the mind. But other than the changes of the Dharma, there is no true existent entity that is the production or extinction. If there is no extinction or production, since what is causal does not exist, since those production and extinction doesn't exist, if those causes produces the consciousness, what appearance does the consciousness assume? The so-called production is just the defiling object of Dharma, and we had already refuted the existence of Dharma, the defiling object of Dharma. Therefore, there is no form that it could assume. Since there is no form that could assume, then how could there be any realms that can be established? If there is nothing discernible about the consciousness, how can a realm be established for it? And then, therefore, you should know that as to the mind, the dharmas being the condition that produce the realm of mind consciousness, none of the three realms, the three places, the three dhatus exist. Thus, the mind, the dharmas, and the realms of the mind, these three, does not have their origin in causes and conditions, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. According to the fundamental wisdom of Madhyamika, it says that therefore they're just simply names, and that is the meaning of Madhyamika. Since everything produced from causes and conditions, I state that it is non-existent. They're simply just the names. Let it be any of the three, the mind, dharma, or realms of the mind. These three do not have their origins in causes and conditions, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. Good. That's the Surangama for today.
Chubun Sunin Ruwa Zunga